evening and welcome everyone back to in-person Utility Commission meetings. We're going to call to order this meeting of the City of Rollingwood Utility Commission on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. And to begin, we'll start with roll call, and if we can start to my left,
Clark Wilson.
Ronald Hasso.
Jonathan Miller.
Christopher Meekin.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on to public comments. I didn't see any signatures. And I don't see anyone coming in. So moving on from public comments to the consent agenda. The first item is a discussion and possible action on the minutes from the July 6th, 2020 Utility Commission meeting, which was attached to the packet. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Yes.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve them?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion is seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes from the July 6th, 2020 meeting? All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Moving on to the regular agenda. First item is discussion and possible action regarding a water meter upgrade policy. Now, if I recall, so page 6 of the agenda has some discussion around the water meter. Has anyone had a chance to review the language?
Yeah, so I thought the first thing was missing was how much.
Well, we see the cost.
Well, the cost, so on the back side is the cost. I took the numbers and it looked like the cost of these electronic meters is about $540 each, is that right?
We were saying $324,000 for 600 meters. Is that?
It comes out to be around 500 something. So that's an estimate, I guess. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I guess the question I would have is they talk about where the funds would be split, the cost would be split between the two funds, but I don't see a budget on those funds showing that they can actually support those costs. I know we did a number of changes to our water and wastewater rates with the hope of being able to maintain the system. I don't know if we built in this much cushion into the budget.
So the other question was to understand what if no one wanted to rush into buying or getting an electronic meter, what would be the practice and cost? Would the city bear all the cost, or would?
Well, as this, the form here reflects the city covering the entire cost, right? $108,000 a year covered by those two funds. I suppose those costs could be supplemented by, by an assessment through that goes into those funds. Or ultimately we could then pass the cost along, covered by the fund, but passed along to the residents. I guess one question would be, if you're a resident, and you don't want the upgrade, you don't want to pay for the upgrade, does that change the price if we only have 30% buy-in, 40% buy-in?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lifetime and meters are replaced at some rate, and I don't even know what that is, but that would be some information to understand what we should be doing. I think there's a usual pace of replacing meters.
So there's waiting for the natural replacement time frame to take place over all of those meters. I imagine that would take 50 years.
Exactly.
before.
Well, I think they have, it's more like a 10-year lifetime.
But I'm saying, well, I guess you could say, so the longest it would take would be 10
Yeah.
years from today for the newest meters that have gone in.
Yeah.
Right, so,
And it seems like the meters are getting close to the end of their life as is regardless, based on what Amber was saying in her policy.
I can give some additional context.
That would be
Please.
great.
Amy Patillo, I'm the Utility Commission Liaison, for the record. So the question of the water meter policy has come up before the council over the last couple of months and got kicked to you all to start discussion of, because we have funds that are coming in from the American Relief Program, and we spent a large portion of them on adding a backup system to each of our lift stations. So most of the funds have gone in that direction. And initially when Amber was proposing that we use part of that funds part of those funds for the backup for the lift stations, she had put in 1 year worth of their subscription service that we have to pay for. So during the meeting, we took a larger chunk of those funds than she had initiated and allocated them to pay for 3 years of the subscription service. That way we have kind of the M&O already built in, and we're not having to look for it. And so that reduced then the amount that we would have for the water meter replacement, because initially she had kind of figured out that we could do both the backup generators on the lift stations and replace all of the water meters and
Okay.
just replace them all and use those funds for that. But because we decided to shift more of the money to make sure that we could cover some of that cost, and we were also able to negotiate paying up front for 3 years and getting a reduction in the cost. That was the issue, is that Gavin and I were both asking them how much of a cost savings we could get if we paid up front. So as a result of that, now there's not enough, we don't have enough allocated or in what's remaining of those relief funds to put towards the water meters. And so there needs to be some type of policy created for staff to know, do we start replacing them now as people are wanting replacements? And does the city start paying for those replacements now? Or does the city, do we have people who are just wanting an upgrade right now pay for that upgrade? And then we kind of figure out how much it's going to cost and how to start phasing in replacing all of them. So that's a little bit of the context. I think if Amber were here, she would probably have a suggestion for how to navigate it. And I don't know, I'm guessing that she had both of those documents in here,
So
because she may have a suggestion for how to navigate it.
what was the cost per year of the, I guess, the software and support for
For the lift stations?
for the meters?
Oh, for the meters. So what you have in here on the exceptional item, so there's 2 documents from what I can tell. On the attachments, the first one is that water meters upgrade policy that she wrote, that I think was a suggested policy that you could say, yes, we like this policy and this is how we want to start updating meters right now. And then the second attachment, at least what I'm looking at, is the exceptional item that she submitted for the digital water meters as part of budgeting. And now I'm trying to remember what happened with that item.
So this was for the purchase of the meters, but you've already committed to pay whatever the license fee or software support for these meters.
Oh, so there's 2 different issues. So we had about $390,000, I think, from the American Rescue Plan funding. So we decided to put the majority of that towards paying for backup generators.
Right.
And the subscription software support for those backup generators. We paid for 3 years up front and got a
so there's-
reduced, of service, and got a reduced
That was
fee.
for the generators. Is there also a software subscription needed for the water meters?
So for the water meters, there is, yeah, and
There will be.
there will be.
And is it per meter or for a citywide license?
It's a good question.
I'd be shocked if it wasn't on a per meter or chunk meter.
Yeah, think-
First 50, next 50, next
Yeah.
50 type scenario.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was thinking you were talking about something else, and now I see what you're asking. I appreciate that. Is it per water meter?
So the water meter policy, this isn't actually a policy. I think it's just an explanation from Amber as to what's happening. And then how do we discuss a policy based on
Yes.
the information in here, which is, number one, there's 600 meters. Number two, 80% of them have over 1 million gallons that have run through them. And number three, that we devote city resources in meter reading, right? We are aware of the 6-month pilot that has been going on with regard to the electronic meters, and some of the benefits that come with that. Not only does it free up resources from the city who are doing water meters, but also provides users, residents with fairly real-time data on their water usage, and can help catch leaks early or allow people to plan for conservation, what have you. But it does provide you with a greater degree of granularity around the information from the water meter than the ones that we're using now. And certainly there's been many cases of people coming in to contest their water bills, and we send the meters out and they're like, I don't know, the meters mostly work, so how does that happen? With the electronic meter, you can be like, you have a meter, you can check your water every single day, every week. So it does provide that benefit. The final paragraph in here references that a number of the developments that are going on, new residential developments, have asked for upgraded water meters. Generally, I'm thinking that means upgraded size to 1-inch water meters. And so there was discussion or reference in here for all of those requests to a larger 1-inch meter, that we would simply require them to put in a digital meter. I have no problem with that conceptually, so I think that is a good place to start with regard to the water meter policy. And then I think, to Amy's point, I think it's up to us to have some discussion around how do we want to address the idea of the rest of the residents getting these meters, right? Is it, we think we need to send notice to every single's home and collect information before making a decision? Do we simply want to say upon request, you can have a meter at your own cost installed, or if your meter is tested and broke, past its usable life, that the city would replace that for you? I don't know. These are all things I think that they were hoping we would discuss tonight. And I don't know if that means we're going to come to a consensus on a policy tonight to send to council, but I think that's where they wanted us to begin.
May I throw a thought out? That the city pays for the standard meter, whatever you and I have and Clark has, for all 600.
This
And
is
then if
the
you want to
5/8.
upgrade, 5/8, isn't 5/8?
You're saying size, based on size?
Yeah, it's whatever I think it's 5/8 that we all normally, is there?
Most of them are 5/8.
Yeah.
It's kind of split if
Yeah.
it's a newer home.
The-
because
And then
of-
if somebody wants a 1-inch, then they pay the difference. So let me throw that out there and somebody poke holes in it.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Do we know what the numbers are for those? We don't.
I know we have that information because we've seen it when we were doing some of the rate study work. We have the breakdown of the number of all those,
I don't have it.
the homes with 1-inch, and so on. I guess the question is, moving to a electronic meter aside, are we saying that simply having a 1-inch meter, because of the implied additional usage, that there should be a penalty
No,
for
no,
having
just
a larger
additional
meter?
cost of the whatever the additional cost of the 1-inch meter and how to maintain it, They pay that, not that they're bigger users, cause they pay that in the water bill.
So they're saying, right, if you want if you need a bigger meter, you cover the cost difference, but we pay for all,
We pay
We
for
basically cover
we pay
the-
for 5/8, and anybody above that pays, you know, and the incremental cost can't be that much.
yeah.
Cause we don't charge them for meters now when they break. We don't charge them for mechanical meters, so.
Seems to me that the real benefits for the city would become if we changed all the meters.
Correct, it's either all or nothing.
That's,
All
I
or
feel like
nothing.
starting with new developments is a great idea to get some started, that as properties turn over, yeah, we should require a new digital meter, because in the grand scheme of building a home or remodeling a home, it's a small cost and there's big benefits to the city and to the end user. But it seems to me my opinion is we should figure out a way to replace all of them so that we don't have people spending a couple days of the month reading all the meters and everything is just streamlined and digital.
Sorry about the Zoom, it's stuck.
But anyway, the general thought was to have a 3-year changeover time, is that correct?
And, do it, start on one side of the city, go to the other, so
Yeah,
the meter
but-
readers, can concentrate.
Right. So I mean, if we did a policy just for the first year where we took all new accounts, and somebody buys a house, and somebody builds a house, and see where we are after a year, we could.
Well, you're talking roughly 200 homes a year, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if we have that many,
Well, I think
maybe we do, I don't know how many live, we had about, wasn't it 50 sites under construction?
I think the number of homes is more like 500, and then there must be the commercial.
I'm sorry,
Correct.
good point. And so I guess we should say on the residential side, 3-year rollout, priority given to new construction. You don't wanna certainly have them halt their construction because they haven't got the new meter, but we're requiring them to have it. So prioritize, new development in that first, well, I mean, I guess it always gets priority, because even in year 2, if a new development starts, you wanna make sure they get their meter. And then just a phased rollout, and that can be determined by the vendor and staff, where to start, what makes the most sense to kind of hit every house. Whether it's geographic or lottery or whatever, I don't really,
As much as I wanted to say we should do it, kind of across the city, like I have one of these now, and they know not to read it because you can see on top of it, there's a thing,
Yeah.
so, but they still have to go down the street. So I was hoping that they don't have to go down the street.
if you do a geographic rollout, then you
Yeah,
start
then
to
they don't have to go down
minimize
the
the number of,
street.
you do a whole street at once,
Yeah.
now you've eliminated a meter reading street. That makes sense to me as well.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I don't know this vendor, but I know the previous at least vendor. You might get a bulk pricing
Exactly.
if you buy all 600 at once.
That's what
Well, I
I'm
think that would be the plan, but I can't
don't
imagine they
know.
can
Or
deliver it.
I don't know we
if
can
you break
afford it,
it
but
up
yeah.
and-
Well, they offered to finance it, and, the rates are so low right now.
They did offer?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I guess that's a good question. This plan is a cost over 3 years. Is that based on them saying, look, we're not gonna be able to install 600 meters in your city in.
200 a
in-
year seems like a good pace.
Right, this is, you'd still order them and buy them all up front, but there's still a phased rollout, of installation.
Figure one a workday.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't do it, but it seems like it took a half day to do mine.
It all too depends on the meter box, how deep
How
down,
messed
Yep.
up it is,
how messed
how
up it is.
connected to
how-
old man Hatley's surplus pipes that are busty, and I shouldn't say that on the record. It's,
Yeah, it's,
it could be a couple days for some, or it could cause a huge leak on others.
hopefully that's not the case, but
It doesn't look easy.
So it sounds like we're coming to some consensus around what we would think would be a reasonable recommendation regarding this policy, but prior to putting it into a motion, I would ask Amy if this sounds consistent with what you would anticipate City Council wanting to see from us before, we waste anyone's time being like, yeah, that wasn't what we were looking for.
So, why don't you tell me, I've taken notes on questions that were asked that we don't have the answer to, that might impact it, like how many active permits are open
Right.
now, to see kind of how many new builds are we gonna have. Also, what's the difference in cost between the different sizes of digital meters? To
Yep.
decide if you wanted to try to set a policy where you set a base amount. How long does it take to install? I'll rephrase what it is. Too sorry. I know if people are watching, it's probably frustrating to not be able to hear, so I'll come up here. So I had, the questions I just said were, how many active permits are open for buildings right now? What's the difference in cost from the 5/8 up? How long does it take to install? And I think, and then also, I think it was our previous vendor who gave us the financing option for the digital meters. I don't think it's Crossroads
Oh.
that gave it, but
I
I could be- I could be
assume
not-
we could, there's some way
But
to borrow against it at
Yes.
really low rates.
Crossroads may have a program.
We don't know if we
I
heard
think it was our previous vendor who offered them under a financing, so I could be misremembering,
I
but,
remember it as 1 or 2%, or something
Yeah.
crazy like that's
so
right.
we may be able to just take advantage of bulk pricing. But what I was getting from the discussion is that you're looking at, maybe a policy that looks at phases, with the goal to replace all of the meters within a certain period of time, so that we're getting the cost savings then of our personnel not having to go out and read the meters. And that's what I have right now. So I guess the question is, do you want some of those other questions answered first before you would kind of give those as your general policy direction that you would want to give?
So I think conceptually, and I'll ask if there's agreement on the commission for the city would cover the cost of what we'll consider a standard meter, but that if a resident needs a more expensive meter, that they cover the difference in the cost for that meter. I think that seems reasonable. I don't know if everyone else seems reasonable, then I would say maybe it doesn't matter what the numbers are. I think we all agree standard meter, it would be free, and it's, you still get the benefit of the cost, but you'll have to pay a little more if you need a larger meter. Similarly, I think I mentioned a little bit about prioritizing some of the new development from a install timing perspective, because you don't want it to hold up, getting an occupancy permit or something to that effect. So I don't think anyone is in a rush necessarily to get the new meter, and if they had to wait because, a construction site needed it, I think that would be, again, a reasonable approach to some of this. Certainly, we can add other priorities, like your meter's broken. I mean, obviously, if a meter's getting replaced, it would also receive, priority over just the standard rollout. So that, I think, is some of the ideas that were floating around tonight. And I don't know, while I think the questions are good and I do think they're relevant, I don't know if they would necessarily impact those ideas around the policy.
I would also argue for as soon as possible in a phased way, so that the readers can just ignore a certain block of homes. And if we can finance these and buy them in bulk and save money, And if the financing charge is reasonable, let's get after it. I mean, if it's a good idea, let's do it. If it's a bad idea, let's not do it.
Fortunately, deciding to do it or not do it doesn't fall on us.
I know. But we get to suggest. We get to suggest.
I think the types of policy suggestions you're making on, so now I have written down the first tenet would be, and y'all can adjust this, but just for note taking, setting a standard meter size and then charging the customer the cost of meters that are larger than that, prioritizing the new development meters first so it doesn't hold up development, prioritizing if a meter is broken, and then prioritizing as soon as possible a phased way of going street by street to start avoiding having to read as many streets. And then also looking at, I guess under the as soon as possible is seeing what bulk pricing or financing is available to go
Your
ahead
notion
and.
of bulk pricing.
Okay.
Because it seems like if they have a crew out and the crew's coming out 5 days a week, it's so much cheaper than doing it hodgepodge.
So not trying to do this over 3 years, but maybe even looking at
As
1 year.
best they can.
As best
you
they
know?
can, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would ask the vendor to tell
Yeah.
us what,
Realistically, how many can they do?
Right,
In
what's-
a certain time frame.
it may matter, it may not matter, but
Exactly.
we'll do what we can if it makes
Exactly.
sense, if it's within our power.
Yeah, so the numbers are not in front of us in terms of what it costs to read meters at the present time. But it's not cheap, I'm sure, to have.
It takes them, just to give
It's
you
a
an idea.
time,
It takes them at least 2 to 3 days, and then if it comes back with a high reading, I send them back out to
Yep.
do a reread.
So it's 6 man days or something like that?
So it could take, and you have both Nate and Vicky reading them at the same time, so they're devoting 2
Two people.
days at least, and then another day for rereads. So, and the rereads would go, not necessarily away, but they would go away in a
Yeah.
sense, because we could log in and see.
Right.
There, you really did use,
And
10,000 gallons because of this timable pattern that you have going off every day.
yep. So, now that we have some framework around some of these ideas, is the next step that we work with Amber, with you, with staff, say, let's put a framework around this, let's put this up, and then we would still have to decide if that's what we want, and then decide to send it? Right, so we're not finalizing language this evening, or are we?
It's kind of up to you all, but I think that there's enough unanswered questions that maybe we should come back. I mean,
Okay.
that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the next time we come back, we can have this in a framework for people, and a policy that says, this is what we all talked about, this is what it looks
Yeah.
like.
and here's the dollar amount.
And
for
here's some of
bulk
those things that we
pricing.
talked
So,
about.
I mean, that's my 2 cents. If we take it to council, that would probably be better.
Okay.
But this is, Amy?
I would say the one timing issue that's still unresolved potentially for y'all is what to do between now and when the policy gets adopted about people who are coming in and wanting an upgraded meter.
In
And
fact, so I
whether,
would,
and that's
yeah.
what she has in there is basically a policy that you could say, we agree that right now, if you're coming in and requesting an
thank you.
upgraded meter, that the customer pays for it. And then as we get closer to that timeline of starting for the city to pay for it, then you can just kind of figure out if there's any type of reimbursement you
I
want
was
to do.
gonna say, I would consider that
that's what I
we
would
would
think, yeah. That
accept
we do some
reimbursement
sort of rebate
requests.
as a
But
donor.
I think that's the question for staff is what to do right now.
Okay.
Do they keep on putting in the mechanical meters, or do they go ahead and start putting
No,
in
they should
the,
What's
definitely,
the point?
and then who pays for it?
It should
Yeah.
just be required for all new construction that you have a digital meter.
Yeah, any new meter should be digital, no
Yeah.
Yeah,
deal
that's
with the
what-
rebate or no. you
so
know.
it'd be useful to know the number or the number of new construction
Mhm.
we anticipate over the next year, for example, and the number of,
Well, I think that we would, I feel like we can move forward tonight and just say, let's direct staff to push the digital meter now at the cost of the owner or the developer, whomever, with the understanding that a policy will be in place down the road, which will potentially, I'll just say, permit a reimbursement depending on, that's right, you're not gonna get a full reimbursement for the 1 inch if we decide that 1 inch we're not paying for entirely. So we would need to have that, but I think that if things are happening real time, let's get those digital meters in.
Mhm.
If they're being put in over the next, whatever it is, 30, 60, 90 days while we muddle this around, so.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine a 1-inch meter is that much more expensive than a 5-inch. I mean, it can't be that much more. Who knows though?
Well, I know that the 1-inch meters, a lot of the newer homes are having to put those in order to comply with our fire
Fire
code
codes,
requirements.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fire codes.
So the majority of the new homes are, what's the square footage, like 30 some, 3,500? I can't remember what it is.
It's a little bit higher than that.
Maybe 4,000?
I think it's 4,000.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I think it's a little bit higher. And then, yes, it does require you to have the 1 inch.
Well, we'll deal with the definition of standard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When that comes up, because we
Boy,
could
that has
say,
changed since I moved in.
yeah. But I think for now, maybe we'd like to make a motion with regard to current meters that are being requested to allow for the digital ones to be installed.
so the motion would be to make, for the city to require digital meters for all new or replacement meters starting now. Is that basically
Ooh,
it?
you raise a good point. What about busty meters?
Busted meters?
Yeah.
That would be digital, new or replacement would be, and that would be, at the moment, would be, I guess, at the expense of the,
I would think until we, I mean, unless you're gonna say a new construction is the owner's cost, but a replacement would be the city, because the city would be
That's
replacing
where I
it
would go.
anyway.
okay, so,
I think that seems more fair to people
That's
on
where I'd
fixed
go.
income.
okay, so,
Because new development, it's an incidental cost.
Unless it's
part of it.
not a standard meter.
okay, so the motion would be that we implement, all new meters will be digital. The, meters for new construction will be, the cost will be borne by the builder, and replacement meters for broken meters will be borne by the city. Does that sound like a good,
Up to 5/8,
Up to
Yeah,
5
for
up to
5/8?
5/8.
and then the cost differential would still be covered by the
Okay.
homeowner.
That sounds reasonable.
And this fee for the upgrade will include cost of the meter plus 10% administrative and installation fee. That we want to add to this, because that was Amber's recommendation.
Okay, so that will apply to the new meters, new construction, and, the replacement of broken meters, that won't apply. Unless it's a 1-inch meter.
Unless we do it now.
Okay, did we get that? Is that a
I think
motion?
Amber would ask me to repeat.
I can read you.
Thank you, Amy.
I'm kind of I really am a fast typist, so I end up typing really quickly and just recording stuff at meetings, so it's helpful right now. I wrote down a motion to have the city install all new meters as digital meters. That would make sense. And for new construction, the cost is to be borne by the builder, and for replacement, for broken meters to be borne by the city up to 5/8 inch, and then the cost differential to be borne by the owner, and with the cost of the meter to include the cost of administration plus 10%.
Sounds good. I think that's what I said.
That's the motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Motion seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. So that takes care of the current issue of new meters being replaced. I think with regard to the broader policy, I think we have some great ideas that Amy has written down for us on our behalf, and that we can share with Amber, and then she can help put a framework around that for us to review and make any additional recommendations on at the next meeting.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Self-service.
Yes. So moving on to the next item, which is update and discussion regarding the cellular service in the city of Rollingwood. And so for some background on this issue, we have been talking to carriers as well as private contractors regarding the cellular service in town, as we've kind of heard people talking, residents certainly complaining about the quality of cellular service in town. Our first call was with AT&T. They obviously talked about the last time that they were contacted about this, and had done some work putting in a tower up near the pool site. And when the recommendation came in, or request came in to City Council to get an exception for the height of that tower relative to, I think, what was actually permitted, that's when residents were discouraged and came up and helped defeat this idea. So AT&T on the phone, I took it that they said, hey, there's a lot of effort. It could take us up to 2 years to do it, and you didn't support it last time. They really don't have any interest in helping you with your cellular service. That was how that phone call went. Following that, we had a conversation with a group here called Motive Communication, who talked about bringing in a private network. With some of the follow-up discussions, they brought in, and it's referenced in the notes from the last meeting, a company called GenXcom that talked about putting in a cellular mesh system. We didn't get as far as having them do a review of the city, where we have areas of strength and weaknesses as far as signal, because I think one of the main issues that the mesh system did not address was that if you leave, you will lose a call. As soon as you leave
Right.
the network,
I remember
your
that.
call will drop. And if you're coming into town, you don't get on the network automatically, so your call will drop anyway. So unless it was extremely reasonable, it would obviously be a lot of effort to go and network the entire city for a private network that doesn't actually help people who are trying to leave the city. So I don't know, I think we took a little pause on that relationship, that vendor idea, and then had another conversation with a carrier. We spoke with Verizon a few weeks ago, who came in, one, to address some of the issues we have with our emergency services, and the police having difficulty receiving calls cellular around town, but also we were asking them about the broader issue of service in the city. One of their early recommendations, or easy recommendations, was that because the public works folks are on Verizon, and most of city staff is on Verizon, they were able to take some of the numbers and they could track them and track areas of strength and weakness within the neighborhood as they go about their daily routine. So I had not yet seen any feedback as far as how that was going. I do know that we shared a few of the numbers with Verizon, and they were going to help do some of this. So Sharon, I don't know if you have any feedback from Amber on this at all, because I saw Ashley had mentioned that we might have some. So I don't think we have any more data yet. So we've spoken to AT&T, they kind of brushed us off. We tried one private vendor, the solution wasn't quite a good fit. We didn't even get into the cost scenario there. And then we spoke to another vendor that's not necessarily opposed. I just don't know if they know exactly what the next step is. They did talk about how there's a tower right there.
Right.
And we said, great, it doesn't work here. That being said, they came in and set something up, and all of a sudden the service in and around City Hall was much stronger. And we were all, well, we're at 4 bars anyway because of the node they have in there, but they put a better node, and I don't remember, Amber walked out to her car and it worked fine, where normally it doesn't. So, that was just a booster that they were using, that they had in their trunk, and they're like, here, let's just set this up. So, maybe there's some solution with Verizon, but that still is only a single carrier in the neighborhood and maybe doesn't address it, but I know this is on that because I wanted to know the update from Verizon. Maybe we're just still waiting to hear and there's no action to be taken today. But again, as I know that this is an issue that many residents are talking about, wanted it on here. And if there's anyone that has any comments or ideas or thoughts about what we might want to do going forward, want to open it up.
Well, so how does it work with Verizon and all the other cellular carriers? Do they talk? Let us talk through their antennas if we are on something else, T-Mobile or whatever.
So the engineer from Verizon had mentioned one. Let me see kind of if we can find out where some of the areas are. And I'm like, it's the whole place. But okay, if you
Right.
want to find specifically where the areas are. He did mention that it might be, we could have maybe some improvement with subtle changes up in the tower of just changing the angle of some of the antenna arrays and how they are, on the tower. But that, even making some of those changes, takes time to talk to their engineering folks. We talked about the potential for some small cell, and he said, okay, let's think about that, but we didn't really get too far. I think the first thing was to try to somewhat map the area and then see what the options were. At the end of the day, I don't think the carriers are 100% interested in doing it at their own cost. So, I'm not sure where that leaves us, other than maybe trying to find another private contractor that would build for us a private network that would then go out and get the carriers on it for, I don't know. But again, it's something we've talked about. I wanted to make sure there was more opportunity to discuss.
Yeah, but to me, it seems like if Verizon were to pursue any of this, we would all want to switch to Verizon. I feel like it would be not a windfall, but they'd get, a couple hundred people. I have AT&T. I would gladly switch to Verizon
know.
if I knew that they were the self-service provider in Rollingwood, that you could get me a call in a case of emergency.
Yep.
But it seems like they're more willing to work with us than AT&T, but I think we just need to get more information from them.
Part of the carrot with Verizon is switching off of AT&T's emergency, which I forget the name of it now.
It was break something, wasn't it?
And they have their own, but they have their own. It's like a dedicated for emergency. And I say, yeah, it's great that you have this, but if they still can't get the signal,
Right.
it doesn't matter that they have priority spectrum,
Right.
from DARPA to like it doesn't matter. If they don't have access to a satellite, it doesn't matter. Like we can't get the call.
If you
in.
have zero
So-
bars, you have 0 bars.
That's right, and they said, well, that's a good point. So, but they do want to talk about, changing all the radios in our fleet of squad cars. But, that is something that they would be interested in doing, so long as we can get step 1 done. They would want the opportunity to get step 2 in here, and it seemed like there were some benefits to their emergency service network over what we have, which is I think through AT&T now. Amber seemed intrigued, and that it would actually help with some of the things the officers are doing, but also had mentioned, hey, you should go meet Chief Brady and talk to him about what's going on in the cars. So there are some things happening, so maybe one can help push the other. So I'm saying not optimistic, but I'm just being cautiously optimistic about moving forward with Verizon to see if there's options there. But I think maybe we also should be just looking at some of the other private options as well.
Yeah.
So, I'll continue to Google things. But I think Verizon is still engaged because of the potential to sell in the emergency service.
So do we know which network our smart or digital meters use, or does it matter? Do we know?
They would probably, if I had to guess, and I don't know for sure, but it would probably be a radio frequency.
I think they're cell.
I think they're cell, but I think they put their own transmitters
Yes.
on
Yeah,
it.
there's their own transmitters, their own batteries.
Yep.
But
So they'll get the signal to
they're
the,
talking to an antenna somewhere, right?
well, if it works from my house and it works from your house.
But it may be that the data rates are so low that it doesn't matter. that they're, even though the service is poor, it's not zero.
Well, right, I mean, even my alarm system manages most of the time. Of course, it's, right now it says it lost cellular connection, but it happens. But I think it's just enough to transmit this much data, to burst once or twice a day, whatever it is. But it's a good point. But it's their own network, it's not on us. It's not as if we're installing something that they need to piggyback onto.
And as I recall, if you lose battery power, if it goes down or whatever, it stores it, and then it'll transmit it whenever it gets the
Yeah,
signal.
but it's using a cellular network, so it'd be interesting or useful to know exactly which one. So that's
Yep.
another question.
Any other discussion on cellular? I mean, again, there wasn't an action item here. It was just, one, I wanted to provide an update on where we were with Verizon. I know that those discussions are ongoing.
So the answer is there's no consensus of the city on a bigger pole somewhere in the park or the pool or whatever. People just, 40% of the people just say no, and we can't put anything on the civil defense fund pole or civil defense notification pole.
Well, it's a little frustrating because you can build a tower that looks like a tree. I mean,
know.
I don't know if it's,
Yeah.
they can make them look just about like anything. All I know is that AT&T told us it would be a 2-year process for them to do it. And, again, Verizon may have some other options. Everyone mentions how small cell makes a lot of sense, so I don't understand why they couldn't install some small cell. Why do they have to put a giant tower in here? But, again, ongoing discussions. Anything else on that item? Okay. An update regarding commercial LUE assignment study.
So, make it official, come over here. I have been in communication with Melissa a lot over the
Okay.
last couple weeks, and she finally has all of the information and is ready to send it all to you guys, but she didn't want to come here tonight until you guys have seen it.
Okay.
And can dig into it,
Yep.
because she's anticipating that you're gonna have a lot of questions. So that way you can see it and then dig into it and make notes and be available to
Okay.
review her recommendations. So it's just really a quick update, but we've got the data.
Okay.
It took a while, as you know. It took a very long time to get the reports from AWR.
Okay. Yeah.
And then when they gave us the reports, they weren't pretty.
Right.
So, and she kicked some back because it was missing information. So, but she has it all. She will hopefully have everything to us by the end of the week, so you
Okay.
guys can see it. So at our next meeting, after you guys have had some time, she's willing to come and talk about it. So then we can possibly make a recommendation to council in November
Okay.
on what that is.
Thank you. We will look out for that information and
So,
look forward to reviewing it at the next meeting. That is the end of the regular agenda. There was one item that I wanted to bring up before we leave, and I don't want it to expand into a much larger item, but I wanted, especially because Amy's here. So we've certainly seen a number of infrastructure issues within the last week or two. I mean, years. But it's really obviously become very obvious. Anyway, so I don't know if this is something that would ultimately trickle down to utility commission to look at, or if this is something that city council just has to figure out what's to do about it, and it may just be so large of a project that it just falls under a capital improvement project, and it's just, let's just go get bids and see what it costs to replace the water system, and it doesn't fall to us. So, but obviously people are asking, and certainly it's an issue. So is there something that you think we should be doing? And, ask while you're here and just appreciate your
Sure.
thoughts on it.
So, I put an exceptional item in during the budget process to look at taking out loans, water loans, one in $2 million, a $2 million amount, and the other in $3 million amount. And we had the numbers run, and Gavin manages our budget process. And so his recommendation was that we wait a little bit longer before we start taking out more loans, and that we're about to pay off some bond debt, and that we would then be able to pick up some new bond debt without changing that amount that we're charging taxpayers for the bond debt. I have continued to advocate that we need to get the money now, and we need to be working on this now. So I think there's some different timelines on the current council of where people feel like this is prioritized. We have capacity right now to take out more tax notes, which is what we did 2 years ago. We took out $2 million in tax notes. $1 million of that has been allocated now to the drainage project down here on, what am I forgetting? It's the Shells and the Marines and the
Nixon.
Nixon, thank you.
Nixon.
Nixon, yeah.
Because those
yes.
poor people get flooded.
Yes, Nixon and Pleasant, yeah.
That corner.
Yes, that corner. And then the other $1 million has gone to the Hubbard Circle drainage project. So it quickly got used up on drainage projects. And when we first started the process of allocating those funds, there was some discussion that we were going to use part of it for drainage and part of it for water. And then it has all gone to drainage because the projects came in bidding out much higher than what was anticipated. So my personal preference would be that we take out tax notes or loans now, because we're going to need an amount of money to go in and address that system issue. I've been getting calls about it and neighbors calling now for 2 years. And I think what I've been doing now when I get them is encouraging them to call all the other council members and not just me, because I haven't been able to get everyone else to have the same timeline on it as I do.
Is there a process of understanding what the total cost, I mean, is this where you go and say the cost of replacing everything
Yeah.
is $10 million?
So
It takes 5 years.
yeah, that's a good question. So my understanding is that with the CIP that we did allocate money to finish up the CIP that would give us that number. So that is in process now for K-Freeze to work through that. And that's a data point that we'll have, like, I think they said in the next month. I pushed for them to get it done as quickly as possible when we allocated the money towards it. And then once we have kind of their assessment of our water system, then we can start quickly prioritizing which projects, but we don't necessarily have the money sitting there to start working on those projects. So I think what I've been trying to do is advocate for the money to get allocated in addition to being ready to get this evaluation so that we can start moving quickly. But I think what the Utility Commission could potentially do, I mean, you all can put anything you want to on your agenda.
Yep.
And you can make recommendations on things whether the council has requested it or not. And so if it's something that you all would like to prioritize, I would be in favor of that. And when that, either looking at where things are right now and saying, this is what we think, this is our recommendation based on the data that we have in front of us right now, that there needs to be a priority towards water projects next and funding water projects. Or you could wait until the CIP data comes and then start making recommendations based on that. But either way, I mean, my thing is that, like, the initial, the threshold for a healthy community is reliable, clean water in your home. And we're not providing that to part of our residents right now. Like, people are having to deal with boil water notices really frequently.
Yep.
So that's where I am on it.
That's
So-
helpful background, appreciate
Sure.
that. And something for us all to consider as we have, opportunities to add things to our agenda or maybe take a more proactive
Mhm.
stance on some of these items. So, and top of mind as my phone is filled with voicemails and
Similar.
text messages from, so,
Yeah, I've been referring everyone to Gavin. and you're welcome to also refer them to call him, because it's not that, I mean, I really respect the amount of time that Gavin puts in on watching over every penny and cent in our city and the plan that he has for how we can be fiscally responsible. So, I don't want to, like, but I also think that there's a need for people to advocate for what they think are our fiscal priorities. And so neighbors calling on that issue would be helpful, because we had 120 people call in on a park issue and then no one there for the water issue. And
We started on the
so
park
I think I think that hopefully people will participate more actively in that issue so that we can prioritize it for our community.
Thank you.
Anyway, yes, thanks for the opportunity to say something about it.
Absolutely. With that, if there's nothing else, I think we are ready to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank
Good.
you.